Well, welcome back, and always an honor when we have time to sit down with Troy Miller. He's the CEO of the National Religious Broadcasters. He's also Superman's twin brother. He can outrun a locomotive. He leaps tall buildings. He's faster than a speeding bullet, and he never sleeps. But most of all, I can call him my friend.
Wow, Perry, it's great to be with you. That's an introduction for the books. Wow.
How you doing, brother? When do you sleep, or do you?
I don't. Sleep is that one. It might have been the one there that was true.
Yeah.
But farm boy, Navy boy, we just don't need much sleep.
Atta boy. Thanks for your time, Troy. I know you're busy, and I value it greatly. Wanted to get caught up on a lot of things. I see recently the NRB asked the FCC to review the comments by Jimmy Kimmel. What's your thinking behind this?
Yeah, look, Perry, we've had just so many incidents. You know, this is the third attempt, and not that Kimmel's direct comments that night led to this third attempt, but we've had a third attempt on the president's life. We've had multiple school shootings. We've had attempts on other political and corporate kind of people, all in this kind of realm of violence is the way we solve our disputes today, and a lot of them have come on the left, and we think it's time to somebody needs to take actions. Kimmel's comments, while you know, Perry, we are at the core of what we do is defending free speech, the First Amendment, the right to free exercise of religion. But the Constitution isn't just a blank slate either. You can't run into, for example, the movie theater and yell fire and have a bunch of people get trampled and not have a responsibility there. So we think the FCC needs to look at this and really send a message that this rhetoric from the celebrities, politicians, influencers on the left and the right needs to be tampered down.
Okay. So the big question, I think, Troy, is how do we do that without infringing upon First Amendment rights?
Well, Perry, if you read the piece, the Supreme Court has already taken this case up. They've already said what is constitutional, what's unconstitutional. So if your speech calls for direct violence against a person or incites action like that, or incites others to action, then that's crossed the line. That's where the line gets crossed there. So it's not like we're carving out new areas here. What we've asked to do is the FCC to apply the Supreme Court's litmus test to this. And if they feel that it meets that, then ABC and the Jimmy Kimmel Show should be fined for this.
Okay, because since this happened, of course, that was the evening before the correspondence dinner when Kimmel did this, and then, of course, the fallout from this. And in the meantime, it looks like politicians, celebrities are bearing down on it. They're getting worse, not better. You kind of ask yourself, where is this going? Troy, you have any idea?
Well, yeah, look, we have a problem in society today. I mean, the polarization is one thing, but we lack, I think, Perry, we lack the moral grounding and the ethics that this country once held in high regard and high esteem. We immediately, and it happens on both sides, but I'm just going to say it happens a lot more on the left than it does the right. Mm-hmm. If we can't come to, let's say, an agreement, or we don't like what the other side's doing, we don't like their policies, then we immediately call for action and call for violence. And again, that's not protected speech. We need to take some responsibility as a country, as individuals, and bring civility back to this whole process. We can have debate and discourse and dialogue about these things. And look, that's what our elections are for. They decide who's going to run the country and who gets to enforce which policies, budget allocations, and such.
So what do you think the FCC is going to do with this? Do you have any idea?
No, we haven't heard back from him yet. Chairman Carr did make a mention of it in his comments the other day. We're hoping that the FCC will investigate this and look into it and take the appropriate action.
Okay. I want to come back to some of these big mergers. Netstar and that, you've been following that. We have too. And more, let me say this, state attorney generals are coming out against this. Now, this sets up an interesting twist with Chairman Carr. What? This is why, Troy, you don't sleep at night.
I can be a friend one minute and a foe the next, in this industry. Yeah, look, there's been a lot of talk about different mergers. And of course, the Nexstar Tegna merger was approved by the Federal Communications Commission and then rapidly put into place. I believe there are 2 court cases, one on the West Coast and one out of the D.C. Circuit, that have put that merger on hold. Matter of fact, I think the last update I saw, the judge actually told the companies to, if they have entangled anything, back it up. Because I think we're going to find at the end of the day that the FCC actually probably overstepped its authority here, whether or not it even has the authority to allow this merger to go beyond the ownership caps that Congress has set. And that's why I think you've seen so many attorney generals step in.
So was this like just an administrative decision? It didn't go through the full vote of the commissioners?
It seemed to be, yeah. It came out of the Media Bureau as a administration decision. I don't know if that was the commission, putting some cover for themselves. But whatever it was, look, we think that consolidation it's a real challenge here, because look at for the chairman. On one hand, he's going after ABC and NBC compact for discriminatory hiring practices, and he's called in for an early license review on ABC, talking about these big giant corporate media companies. And then on the other hand, he's saying it's okay to have more big giant corporate media companies. The president of Nexstar said at the NAB convention a few weeks ago, I think he put the cat out of the bag when he said, look, I think in the next, I can't remember what the time frame he was, but the next several years, that we're going to end up with only 3 major broadcast station owners. That can't be good for localization, and it can't be good for the industry.
Okay, because my next question for those who are listening in and say, what are you guys talking about? It is that very issue, that if you left with, say, 3 major broadcast corporations, what will be the rhetoric, what will be the commentary from those agents or from those owners?
Well, look, whenever you have an industry that has just 2 or 3 of the top companies, in consolidation, right, they become the guides for the industry. Everybody else's voice just goes, to the wayside. And I think the biggest problem with this, Perry, is going to be localization.
Yeah.
It's already hard. We're already fighting to get our Christian broadcasters carried on these streaming platforms. Right now, if those streaming platforms only have to deal with 2 or 3 major owners, they're going to look at all of the independent, owned and operated and smaller stations just as noise. And it doesn't seem like the Federal Communications Commission, which had a public interest standard at one time, is going to come to our aid.
Well said. Bingo, you hit the bullseye. All right, let me take a quick break. I'm going to switch the topic and come back to something I know is very dear to your heart. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, check out the nrb.org website. It is the organization to belong to no matter where you are in Christian communication. This is the place to be a member. Go to nrb.org. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back, and honored again to have back with us Troy Miller, CEO of the National Religious Broadcasters, talking about a variety of things. But I want to switch your attention, Troy, to an op-ed piece that you wrote about biblical illiteracy. And boy, this is popping up a lot. I mean, I have a lot of guests on this program, and somehow it kind of comes around, do we know what we believe? Do we know why we believe it, and can we gracefully defend it? The three big questions I ask our audience probably 20 times a week. Why is this a concern to you?
Let me throw one more question in there to ask your audience. If we believe it, then do we live it out?
There you go.
Because that's the big one. You know, we recently worked with the Back to the Bible folks, and they did a survey on the, state of Christianity. And it came out of that survey, one of the things was that, while there's a large portion of our population here in the U.S. that will confess belief in the major doctrines that we hold dear, the virgin birth of Christ, the sinless life of Christ, the crucifixion of Christ for our sins, his death, his resurrection, and his return. So 60+% of our population say they believe in those major doctrines. But when you push that issue about how often they go to church or how often they read their Bible, or the last one, whether or not they actually live a life that's born out in those beliefs, from those beliefs. And that number was down to 14%. And I think, Perry, we talked in the last section, I think that's what we're seeing a lot in society here. It's why we're seeing the moral breakdown, the ethical breakdown in society. We're seeing this, this irreligious society is, I think, coming apart at the seams. And the only way we're going to pull it back together is to get back and actually understand what we believe and live it out.
I'm sure you, like me, I do a lot of surfing across all Christian media. I got nothing else to do between midnight and 4 a.m.,
Right.
And I'm noticing something, though, Troy, and that is that it seems like all of these aberrant spin-offs of Christianity are slowly dying, and we're getting back to the simplicity of the gospel. It seems like the non-essentials are just that, non-essential, and we're coming back to the essential. Are you sensing that across the airwaves?
I really am, Perry. I think there is a real move back to the core, as we call them, doctrines of Christianity, and we're not necessarily worried about those non-essentials. But I think the other things that's happening too is that we're in that whole movement to come back to Christianity, especially amongst the Gen Zers. We're seeing this. They really are looking for something that's not mimicking the culture. So they're not rushing back to the big mega churches and to the different kinds there. They're looking for religion. They're looking for structure, and they're looking for meaning in their faith, and not just to have, I'm just going to say it, not a kind of a social club or a therapeutic kind of preaching. They want some this authenticity and some reality in what they believe.
All right, there's some things on the horizon here. It's just amazing. Last week, as you well know, the Bible was being read from Genesis to Revelation over a 1-week period. Over 500 key leaders were involved in that, including the president. We have the National Day of Prayer coming up next Thursday. 10 days later, we have something that we have never experienced in our lifetime, where the president is calling the nation to rededicate itself to be one nation under God. This is unbelievable, and it's happening in America. What's your take?
It's amazing that's happening in America. I was privileged to be a part of the Read the Bible. I had Hebrews chapters 8, 9, and 10, some of my favorite in the Bible. And what a great event. What a thing. Not only the president, but multiple cabinet members, members of the House of Congress, senators, business leaders, proclaiming God's word over our country and really around the globe. And then, as you said, this coming week up, we'll be in the Capitol building for the National Day of Prayer. There's just, at this time, it seems like this administration understands that how important the Christian foundation is to the fabric of this country. It's the foundation of our democracy, of our republic. Without it, as John Adams said, the Constitution is wholly inadequate, right, to govern an irreligious and immoral people. So look, we're praying for this. We'd ask everybody else to be praying for this. And if you have a chance, come join us all on the mall on May 17th for the rededication.
The three-legged stool here is independence, liberty, and freedom. All of those are biblical issues. In our zeal to celebrate 250 years of independence, liberty, and freedom, how do we make sure that we don't leave God out of that equation?
Well, I think the root of it is we have to understand what our founding fathers understood, that those those rights come from our Creator. They're not rights that come from our government. We don't get them. They're inalienable rights. They're rights that God has given to us in humanity. And I think that's one of the things that has to be stressed. And I think you're going to hear it stressed on May 17th, is that we're calling the nation not just back to its roots, but really calling the nation back to following its Creator, and to really understand what God and how God meant us to live our lives.
How do you think religious freedom's going on, being handled in America these days?
In America right now, I think we're in a really good spot. I think this administration has been super friendly. There was a recent Supreme Court decision that came down unanimous on the side of pro-lifers. There have been several Supreme Court decisions that have come down on the side of Christian organizations, from employment to the right of conscience for people. So I think from a government standpoint, we're seeing a lot of movement away from that weaponization we've seen for the last several decades. We still have a lot of work on the corporate side, Perry.
Yeah.
Corporate America still holds a bias and a lot of censorship and discrimination against the Christian community, and especially Christian communicators.
Well, big amen to that. On that one point you made there, that ruling, it was a 9-0 ruling by the Supreme Court that the donor list of a pro-life pregnancy center could not be given to the state. Now, if you run that over into other nonprofit organizations, that was a huge win for all of us. I wonder if we understand that.
Right. Right, a huge win, because one of the tactics that the left has tried to employ is to get those donor lists, and of course they don't want them just to check the IRS books. They want them so they can intimidate people to stop giving to organizations that they don't support, organizations they'd like to see in. And you're right, this sets a precedent not just for New Jersey in this case, but really tells you where the court looks at this across all 501c3s, all nonprofits.
Religious liberty as it relates to us broadcasters, and we kind of touched on it a little bit. If some of these big corporations have a opportunity to merge, the threat that it is to all of us. The point being here is even broadcasting, though, is changing, and you well know that. It's changing, and a lot of it's being done digitally these days. So do you have any idea, is there an alternative motive behind these mergers outside of broadcasting?
Well, look, I came from corporate America, and so I'll give, corporate America, they're in the business about efficiencies and how to run corporations and to make money. They're for-profit organizations. So I think a lot of them just see these mergers as a way for them to consolidate, make their businesses larger, become more efficient. But it's the implications of all that the federal government is supposed to step in and kind of level the playing field.
Right.
It's interesting that for years when I was in the tech industry, there were constantly lawsuits against Microsoft and against Oracle and against some of these companies, because they had become so large, or they were bullying other companies. So, that's the government's role to step in and say that. We're not necessarily opposed to mergers, but mergers that don't have any safeguards for the hundreds of the other independent broadcasters out there, that's going to ruin the industry.
Troy, thank you, buddy. You always give us time. I appreciate it. I value it greatly. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, check out nrb.org. That is the website. If you do anything in the way of Christian communication, church, broadcast, digital, whatever, you need to be a member of this. They are your advocate. nrb.org. God bless you, pal. Get some sleep.
Thank you.